50 Cent Bulletproof is a game I always wanted to check out in my teens but never had a chance to. So I'm pretty excited to see what the fuzz was about this 2 million copy seller. The period where this game came out was all about the first person shooters, where the games like Grand Theft Auto 3 and Max Payne set the standard relatively early in the PS2's lifecycle. Bulletproof came out much later in 2005 and seems to have been an attempt to try to capitalize on the ultra-violent video game hype that was going on in that period. In the game, you play as 50 Cent, who gets caught up in a trap where they attempt to murder him, and against all odds you manage to survive, and you will need to find out who was behind it, why, and get your revenge. You are however not alone, as you have your entire G unit helping you out through the missions, as well as Eminem, who plays a corrupt cop that's on your side, and also an arms dealer played by Dr. Dre.
Oh shit, is that a ghost?
After your attempted murder, you wake up in 50 Cent's hood in a rundown doctor's clinic, and you're quickly sent out to uncover the events that have just occurred.
Hello?
Damn, 50. I just fixed up one of your soldiers last week.
50 Cent's hood acts as a hub between missions, where you can spend earned money on upgrading your health in the clinic, purchasing new execution moves in the movie cinema, buying new weapons from the back of Dr. Dre's van, and you even have your own crib, which starts out pretty empty, but as you progress it gets filled with your stuff. There's also a bootleg vendor which sells your music CDs and music videos, and you can then play the music from your mobile phone or listen to it on your TV in your crib. The same goes for music videos, as there is quite an extensive library of music and music videos, both from 50 Cent and other G Unit members. Speaking of the phone, it can be used to call various members in your crew, and you can even customize the background images. I thought it was a funny little touch, which is something you rarely see in games these days. Running around in 50 Cent's hood, I noticed that there's quite many sections that have invisible collision for no good reason. And looking at the layout, it makes me wonder if the game at some point was planned to be an open world game, but that it likely ran out of time and they had to cobble something together. The game is quite bad at explaining what you need to do to get the story going, so you simply have to explore the area and talk to everyone until the cutscene triggers. Once that happens, you'll need to go down into the subway to get to your story mission.
I'm being set up. It's the same dudes who ambushed us that night.
The story missions themselves are very straightforward, where you have to navigate your way through often fairly small levels and attempt to find the exit to progress to the next level. The action is pretty much constant, as the game will almost always spawn enemies at you for most of the duration. Finding the exit is also tricky because there are no markers or arrows showing you where you need to go. There is also no clear visual communication of what a level exit should look like, and exits vary from level to level. Sometimes it could be a door, other times it's simply an invisible trigger in an area. While not too difficult, I did find myself running around in circles on some levels, feeling quite frustrated as finding the exit is just not a fun gameplay element. At times the game even sabotages itself by changing the rules of what you can do in the game. Like for example, certain doors are suddenly destructible, which you need to progress through, which was never the case prior to that point in the game. On top of that, the lighting of most levels is quite dark, likely inspired by movies like Fight Club, which of course makes it even harder to find the exit. 50 Cent also moves quite slow, which adds to the frustrations as you end up running aimlessly round and round on the levels, wondering what the game wants you to do. Speaking of movement, let's talk about the combat. The game is for the most part gun-based, and you have a fairly large arsenal of weapons that you carry around at all times. Ammo, while not sparse, is limited to each weapon type, so you do end up switching between the various weapons just out of need due to how spare ammo is hidden and dropped as you progress. I think this is a nice touch, as some weapons are a lot better than others, and this forces you to switch out and try new weapons. The shooting itself feels quite similar to something like GTA 3 or Gungrave, minus the flashy moves of course. It gets the job done, but considering that it's pretty much the only thing you can do in a 50 Cent Bulletproof, it feels underdeveloped. Both when it comes to how it looks visually, as the environment has very little interaction, and also how the enemies react when they get hit. The AI is also not that impressive and has a rather robotic behavior, where they will simply run back and forth while fighting you. The game also has a very tight field of view, and the action at times takes place vertically, and it can be very difficult to pinpoint where the enemies are coming from. Not to mention the lack of directional damage markers, which means that you will constantly have to look both behind you and up to identify enemies. There's also a stealth and execution system. The stealth system is pretty unforgiving due to the lack of feedback on what enemies can see and cannot see, but the executions themselves are very violent and nicely animated. It's just a shame that you have to purchase them individually in the 50 cents hood hub, which means that by the time you have them all, you're already more than halfway through the game. The developer wasted quite a bit of time developing cool content that not many will get to experience fully. Additionally, there is also a cover system, but this just doesn't fit the gameplay due to enemies never staying put, and it simply feels too clunky and slow to be useful. Speaking of clunkiness, the aiming in the game is also incredibly flimsy, and it's simply too easy to overshoot enemies as they move around. The game does feature an auto-snap feature in the options that can be toggled, but from my testing it doesn't seem to be working at all, which is kinda weird. When it comes to the music of the game, you'll be hearing a lot of different snippets from various 50 Cent and G-Unit songs. While the music itself is quite good, I feel like that it rarely fits the action on what was ongoing on the screen, and the transition between them was often quite rough. The voice acting though is quite decent, and in particular you can hear that 50 Cent and Eminem were having a good time recording the audio, and that they seem to take this seriously. The script for the game was written by Terrence Winter, who wrote movies like Wolf of Wall Street and TV shows like The Sopranos and Boardwalk Empire. While the writing definitely isn't on par with something like that, you can tell that they knew that they were writing a story that would fit into a video game. That has a lot of action, and the direction in the cutscenes are often quite well done, and sometimes even show a bit of cinematic flair. Overall, the story is nothing special, but I would still say that it's the highlight of the game. So, is this game worth playing? I would say that for players like me that really loves third-person shooters with a story, it can be quite entertaining in small doses. But due to the action being so mundane, there's only so much you can take until your brain will get numb based on the unpassionate and half-baked gameplay. Besides the story, the other highlight is for sure the violent stealth takedown, which reminds me of Manhunt. But other than that, I think a more recent game that reminds me of 50 Cent is Gungrave Overdose. Both in terms of the slow-paced action against an almost endless barrage of enemies, but also the generic levels with confusing layouts. Overall, I think the developer of this game have all the pieces to make a hit game, but unfortunately all of them are unpolished and they just don't fit well and play well with each other. Perhaps with more development time, this game could have really shined. I'm going to give this game a 5 out of 10. If you're only in it for a gameplay, you're probably better off with playing superior games like Max Payne or The Suffering. But if you want something with a somewhat entertaining story and, with a bit of cutscenes, I think it might be worth a go. In other words, most of you might be spending your time better in the club rather than playing this video game. And that's my 50 cents on this game.
Okay, you can count on that.